The purpose of this interview is to document the experience of a Women's Army Corps, or WAC, Staff Sergeant from November 1949 to January of 1953, including time spent stationed in Japan. Our themes for this interview will include women enlisting in the military and basic training, racism in the southern states, as well as life in Okinawa, Japan, as an Army medic. This interview is being recorded for the Veterans Oral History Project with Delores Hainer, a former member of the United States Army, who will be referred to using her preferred nickname, Dell, for the rest of this interview. I am the interviewer. My name is Kristen Ackley. My partner in this project is Christopher Brunel. Also in the room listening to us today is journalism instructor Jeffrey Hope. Izzy Bouchard is shooting a video of our interview. We are also joined by Jim Neville, Director of Operations at Coal Land Transportation Museum. Students Nathan Allgood, Brianna Beers, Nathan Cram, Zachary Hewins, Dylan LeClaire, and Patrick Orcutt. The date is April 3rd, 2017. We are at Husson University in Bangor, Maine. Ms. Hainer, thank you for doing this interview.
It's my pleasure.
Would you please state your name, date of birth, and where you're from?
Yeah, my name is Delores Hainer. I was born the 4th of February 1931. That makes me 86 years young with old knees. And I was born in Caribou, in Maine.
Thank you. You graduated in 1949 from John Bapst Memorial High School. What events made you want to enlist in the military?
Well, when Pearl Harbor hit, I was in the 5th grade and a wicked tomboy. And I lived in South Brewer. And every house had 1, 2, or 3 kids that went into the military. So they were the examples. And by the time I hit the 8th grade, 1945, that summer, the war ended, and I'm bumming. Look at that, it come and went, and I didn't have a chance. So my class was the first class to start high school peacetime in 1945 as a big freshman at John Bapst with the nuns. 4 years of high school. My senior year in April, I had turned 18 in February. In April, one of the girls had come home from the Navy. And Sister Carmel says, why don't you speak to the senior class and tell the girls what the advantages were? So she talked to us. I thought, God, I could do that, I could do that. So 4 of us went down to the Navy recruiters. And the Navy recruiter said, I'm sorry, miss, you got to be 21 to join the Navy. Well, here I am, bumming again. Look at that. That's 3 whole years away from now. How do I know what I'm going to be doing when I'm 21? I thought that was the stupidest question I ever heard. So down to the Army recruiters we went. They saw us coming. So my cousin and I, Marie, and I went together to basic. We left Bangor the 10th of November, 1949. Korea didn't break out till the next June. And I owe everything. My leaders were my teachers. That's why I have such respect for teachers. My family life, I grew up in a generation where shut your mouth, keep the peace, don't make a ripple, don't be sassy mouth. By and by they'd ask me how I felt, and I thought, God, I don't feel anything. I froze everything right there. So I always had a hard time to express what it was I was feeling. I knew when I was happy because I was lit up like a Christmas tree, and if I was sad, you could pick my face up off the floor. But any other emotion, it was, what do you call it? And that affected me way till I was well grown. We went to basic at Camp Lee, Virginia, which is on the other side of Washington Street, D.C. 13 weeks of basic, a week of bivouac, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. My leaders were my teachers, and this is why I have such a respect for teachers, because I was like a sponge. What's that mean, and how do you do it? And they taught us, and the respect was there, and then with the respect came the trust. They could have asked me to jump off the bridge. I would have jumped off the bridge. Not an airplane, but off the bridge, all right. Basic was wonderful. We were 18. The oldest one in basic was 27. We called her Grammy. God, I couldn't imagine being 27. You know? After basic, I chose to be a medic. There was a variety of tests to show what your aptitudes were. I could have worked in an office, I could have worked in a motor pool, I could have gone to leadership school, I could have gone to cooks and bakers, all these, but I chose to be the medic. That's the mother hen in me. We went to Fort Sam. I hit there in February 1950, and I worked in the orthopedic clinic, which I loved. And the experience that stands out in my mind, I had, I was there April, and then the Korean War broke out in June, and by December, we were getting the frostbites coming back from Korea. And I had this young man.
How do you think your family felt about you joining the military?
Oh, my father wasn't too excited about that one bit, because he wasn't going to be there to, I had 2 sisters. He wasn't going to be there to fight interference. You know, my oldest sister was 4 years older than me. She was the boss. Nancy was 2.5 years younger. She was the baby. And I'm the one in the middle plugging up the holes, so my self-esteem was right in my sneakers. And that's how it was. So the leaders was an important part of my life. I was very happy military.
You mentioned that after enlisting, you were stationed in Camp Lee, Virginia,
Yeah.
for your basic training. How did you travel to Camp Lee? Did you travel with
Oh yeah,
your...
by train. Oh my God, we went by train. Marie and I left, and it was one afternoon we left here, the 10th of November, and we get not quite to Washington, D.C., and I thought, I was getting hungry. Let's go see if there's a dining car on back. She didn't want to go, so I said, well, okay, I'll go down. And as I walked through several cars, in the back was a car with colored on the top. So I looked in there, and there's this little colored woman. And I poked my head in the door, and I said, excuse me, can you tell me if there's a dining car on back? Right off quick, the conductor comes, and he said, oh, miss, he said, this car's for the colored. I said, I know it. I just asked if there's a dining car. She poked her head right out the window. She looked like I hit her with a 2x4. And I didn't know why she did that. He said, but the next stop, he said, you can get off and get a sandwich. Don't stay. He said, the train will be probably there 10 minutes, so just get your sandwich and come back and eat it on the train. I said, I went back and I asked Marie. You know, I said, I don't know what I said to her, but she just looked at me like I hit her with a 2x4. Marie didn't know. You know, I never saw that before.
So that was your first instance of
Yeah.
segregation, was on the train ride to Camp Lee?
In Bangor, in high school, Bobby Nelson was a colored boy. We probably had, say, 15 families in Bangor that were colored. And we'd go to the Y to the dance after the football game on Saturday afternoon, and we'd dance with him, and he'd dance with 50 more. So he was just one of the crowd. You know, wasn't my boyfriend, but come on, Bobby, let's dance, and you'd dance with the others. So I never saw that, and I didn't understand why, you know. So it was awakening up time for me, believe you me, at 18.
What was it like to leave the small community of Bangor, Maine, and go to basic training in Camp Lee?
Oh, I was ready. I was ready to leave home. I think it was a new adventure. Like I said, my father wasn't too excited about me going, but I think after basic training, I got a chance to come home. Then he was all right with that. He was all right. You know, it was a growing up time for me. Was it ever?
Were there any memorable experiences while you were in basic training?
Oh yeah, we wanted to march. We had the cadre were wonderful, and when you have the respect was there, and then the trust came. You know, that's how it was. We wanted them to match us. We wanted to be the best because there were competitions between all the different companies. Every 2 weeks a company was graduating, and the next week another company was forming. Graduation, forming, graduation. And the country was segregated. In 1949, the country was segregated. You had all white companies, and we didn't train with the men. Today they train with the men, but in our time it was separate. And we had a colored company that was all hand-picked. So you see how we were kept apart. Now, after basic training, when I went to Fort Sam in San Antonio, we had in a company of 250 women that worked in the hospital, we had one colored girl. She was in my barracks.
After Camp Lee, you said you traveled to San Antonio, Texas at Fort Sam.
Yeah.
What were your duties during the 2 years that you were stationed at Fort Sam?
I was a medic, and I worked in the orthopedic clinic. It was an experience. We had good people, and the paraplegics were in the second floor down, and I worked on the women's ward, the pediatrics. I worked in the paraplegics ward, and that's where I saw the kids that had spinal cord injuries, and either they were quadriplegics, and that's where the respect was. And the corpsmen were the ones that impressed me so much because they were tender when they had to be tender, and they were firm when they had to be firm. The compassion was there, and I thought, God, if I could ever do it like that, you know. So it was a grown-up time for me. They were the examples. Here again, it was the examples. And you try to take that with you. And then if anybody's sassy mouth, I used to say, look deeper than what they're saying, because there's something going on inside of them, and not take it on.
What were some of the major cultural differences for you between growing up in Bangor and being stationed in Fort Sam?
Fort Sam, there was a little community that built up, not downtown San Antonio, but outside where the base was. You had a corner drugstore and a dry cleaner's place, a little flower shop, and here's this little neighborhood bar. We used to call that little place Snake Hill. And it was hot. Texas was 100 degrees a month at a time. And I thought, oh my God, let's go down to Snake Hill and get a beer and a hot dog. I'd never been in a bar before. So down we went. Softball team went trooping in there. We're sitting in all the booths, and the bartender raps on the bar, and he calls me over. He said, real hateful, he said, is she colored? I said, God, she's as black as a stove. How black you gotta be before you're black? He said, I'm sorry, miss, I can't wait on her. I thought, God, that was my friend she was talking about. Hey, we're not gonna eat here if she can't eat here. So we thought, we'll go to the drugstore. So we all left. As soon as the clerk in the drugstore saw that colored girl, she said, out. I said, Crum, it's the same thing, and I'm really ticked off. Back across the street we went. That night, when I'm in my bunk, I'm up in the top bunk, she's on the bottom bunk, right across from me. And because I didn't know how to get it out, I thought if I asked her why they did that, it would make her feel bad, and I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so I never did ask her. She would have gladly told me. She was a Texan, and she lived with segregation all of her life, but she knew this kid didn't know what segregation was. Was she teaching me a lesson? You bet. And I said, Mine, if I could see you today, I'd share that with you, because it left a big impression. If you give respect, you deserve to have respect back.
Reflecting on that time, if you could tell your younger self anything during that lunch hour, what would you say to yourself?
I didn't understand either. I just didn't understand that. I don't care what color you are and what nationality you are. You're my friend. And you're my friend forever unless you show me you're not my friend, then hang it up. One time, that's all I need.
The Korean War started in June of 1950, and by December, you said you started seeing different kinds of patients at Fort Sam.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any patients that stood out that you still find memorable today?
Yeah. I'm 19. We had this one kid. He come back from Korea, from the Chosin Reservoir. He was in a wheelchair with a little Afghan on his knees. He said, Dell, you going down for coffee break? I was in the orthopedic clinic. I said, sure. So down we went, and we did this 5 to 6 weeks. And the last time I saw him, I heard the wheelchair coming, and when I looked up, I said, I'll be right with you, because I knew what he wanted. And when I looked up, there was no blanket on his knees, and both of his feet were cut off from frostbite. In order to keep the gangrene from traveling up his legs, it would have killed him. And I was dying. Oh, my God. Hey, I was like, never mind Hitler's war. This is war of my own generation. He's 19, and I'm 19. And I was dying. And when I looked up, I had to talk to myself. When I said to him, I'll be right with you, and then I saw those feet missing, in my mind, it was, God, I like to dance, and I bet he does too. Now what's he going to do? I said, when your favorite thing to dance to Glenn Miller and the old swing bands, and now he don't have no feet. So I knew the sacrifice he had made, but I was dying. It killed. The other feeling that I had, and I didn't know how to put it into words, it was the first time I felt my helplessness, because I wanted to fix him, and I couldn't fix him. Now today, because of technology, and this is why when I go to the museum, I tell the kids, get as much education as you can. You can't get away with just a high school education anymore. I said, these kids are skiing down mountains and they're running races, and we never had that in my time. But you know, when he left Fort Sam, that was the last time I saw him. He probably went to a hospital closer to his home to be, you know, closer to his family. But I have prayed for that kid for over 60 years.
After 2 years in San Antonio, you were then sent to Okinawa, Japan. What was your journey like from Texas to Japan?
Well, we flew, we got to Camp Stoneman, and we were there 10 days waiting for all the troops to come, because we were going to be the replacements. Kids that had been on Okinawa 2 years, we were going to replace them, and they were going home. They were rotating home. And one night, one of the kids says, hey, Dell, you want to go get a pizza? And I said, pizza? What's that? This is 1951, okay? We never had pizzas in Bangor. I said, God, it was wonderful. I said, if I had had the money, I would have opened up a pizza shop, but I would have been a millionaire. I said, my $79 a month wasn't going to open up any pizza shop, right? So you see, when you leave Maine, it's amazing because when you're 18, you want to see the world. And everything is right here in your own backyard. You just don't know it. But you see all this stuff and you bring it home. This is where pizza comes from. All the guys that went to Italy, Second World War, they brought home the pizzas. Now, they might have had pizzas in Boston in the beer parlors, but we never had pizza in Bangor.
What were your responsibilities when you were in Okinawa?
Oh, I was a receptionist at Ryuka's Army Hospital, and I helped out in the back. We had Mrs. McCall. She was an Army nurse. Wonderful. We had wonderful people, and I loved it there. We'd go to the village, and I saw this little. She was American Japanese. Now the island of Okinawa is probably 130 miles off the coast of Japan, and this little girl had an American father and a Japanese mother, because all the natives on Okinawa were Japanese. She was blonde with Asian features, the most beautiful little girl you ever saw, 5 years old, and she's in the village digging in the trash, trying to survive because the native people didn't want her. She wasn't one of them as far as they was concerned. I said, I'm taking her home. They said, Dell, you can't take her home. She's got every kind of bug going. I don't care. I'm taking her home. And the WACs decided that we were all going to chip in $10. We took her to the convent, and the sisters took care of her. And I thought of that little girl, such a beautiful child. If I had been a dependent rather than military myself, I would have adopted her.
While you were stationed in Okinawa, did you have any other experiences with the local people?
Oh, yeah. The people, I had Miyoko, she was my little girl. She washed 3 items of clothes, either a skirt and a blouse, a civilian dress, 2 uniforms with it for $10 a month. That's what she charged. And I would bring her, I can remember going to the village, and I brought some fabric, and she went back and made herself a dress and wore it to work the next day. Now, she was the oldest of 6 children, where her family had been killed during the war. Her mother and father had been killed during the war. And she was the oldest of 6, and she was supporting those kids. And she'd bring me back a little vase with a little flower in it, or a little placemat, or a little dish or something for jewelry, things like that. But she was dear. I wished I could see her now. I'd never, because I would never know her, but, you make friends.
Do you have any other stories from your time in Japan that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, yeah, the first time I went, and if you got a sunburn, because Okinawa was a lot like Hawaii, and that sun, they call it the land of the rising sun, and the sun it fills the sky. I mean, magnificent sun. And if you got a sunburn, it was a court-martial offense if you missed work. We'd get down on the beach, it was there 10 minutes, and hey, I come out like a lobster. And I went to work the next day, just like a mummy, but I was there. I said, oh God, I wouldn't have missed that day's work. My life depended on it. But it was the people that made it interesting. I have no regrets being military, none whatsoever. Chris, have you got any questions?
Yeah, I guess to go back to when you first got to basic training, did you find yourself at a disadvantage or being treated differently as a woman being enlisted?
Oh, no,
in
no,
the
no, no.
military?
This was 4 years after the Second World War had ended, 49 in November. And they wanted to make us the best that we could be. Oh, they were sharp. I want to stand like she stand, and I wanted to march like she did, and hey, right a blank and left and march. And we just, because there was competition between the different companies, who was the sharpest, and everybody's in line. Your beds were in line, and your shoes were all lined up, polished, and that stays with you. That stays with you. Inspections, you got rid of anything. Now I'm a pack rat today, but we got rid of everything way back in then. I think being born during the Depression, I didn't throw anything away. Somebody can use it. If I can't use it, somebody can, So you save it, but I'm getting, my kids get after me. No, the experiences, it made me a better person. It made me a better wife and a better mother. It was an opportunity my mother had never had. She was one of the flappers in the 20s. But, it's, I would like to see a universal draft. Today, everything is a volunteer military. I would like to see a universal draft where both boys and girls serve 2 years. If they're not suited, the Army would, Navy, Marine, Seabees, whatever, they would weed them out, but be of service in 2 years for the state, for your town, whatever, and grow up. I saw kids turn their life around. I turned my life around. And I thought, oh my God, you know, it's like, it was a learning curve for me because there's a lot of things I saw that I never saw. But I always expect good things to come around the corner. I'm not one of these that I get time to be sick. You know, keep going. And I'm still keep going. After I run 36 years at St. Joseph's, I'm still, the knees is, you know, the knees aren't what they used to be, but that's okay too.
During your career in the Army, what medals did you earn?
I won the Good Conduct Medal, National Defense, and Occupation of Japan. In order to get the Korean War Medal, you have to serve in Korea proper or like 50 miles off the coast of Korea to be eligible for that.
What are your thoughts about military service and the time that you served?
Oh, I wouldn't trade it for $1 million. I wouldn't trade it. It was the people. It's always the people that make it interesting. I remember being in basic, the kid said, Dell, where are you from? I said, Maine, where's that at? I said, God, didn't you have geography in school? I've never been to Montana, but I got an idea where it's at. The East Coast knows Maine. Hey, Maine to Florida, you bet. Washington State, Texas, New Mexico, Texas, Michigan, Utah. Unless you have a relative that lives there, they don't know where Maine's at. Hey, the first of the New England states, I was almost insulted. Yeah, I was a potato picker from Maine, and there was a wise kid from Boston, and the kid that was a cowboy from Texas. And we had a little Spanish girl from California. She and I were both raised on a farm, and we just hit it off. It's like I met her one day, it's like I knew her forever. You know, it was one of these. And some you can know for 10 years and never know them. They never share anything with you. You know, but my middle son went into the Army. He said, Mama, I'm carrying the torch. And the Army sponsored him to go to med school. So he doesn't have all this tuition and all this stuff that you have to pay back because he was in the Army. He's a cardiologist in internal medicine for 25 years, and he got out. And he worked at this doctor's clinic in Washington State. He said there was no respect there, and he hated it. He absolutely hated it. So a year and a half ago, he gave 3 months' notice on his contract, and then he was out of there. Now he works at Madigan Army Hospital, taking care of the military and their dependents. But he said if I had known when I was in the Army what it was been like, he said I never would have got out. So he's the only one of my 6 kids that was military.
You mentioned earlier that your thoughts about the military now, you think there should be a universal draft. That way both sexes could see.
I think I saw too many kids turn their life around. Kids that were bumming around, didn't have any direction, didn't know what they wanted to do. And the discipline was there. I never had any trouble. I said, with my mother and father telling me what to do and the priests and the nuns, tell me what you want and turn me loose. So I didn't have any hard time because I don't have to know everything. And I didn't know everything. But I was there to listen and to learn. You know, the day that I stopped learning, they better as well shoot me because I'd be so miserable I couldn't stand it.
You mentioned that your son joined the Army as well and pursued a medical career in the Army.
Yeah.
Do you think you inspired him to do that? Do you think you created a legacy?
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. But he was a scholar. Anyway, he called me Mother's Day. He said, Mom, he has one son that's just turned 12, and the little one is about 3.5. He says, was I a little heavier when I was a kid? I said, oh, yeah, you had a mind of your own. I said, but don't try to teach us. I'm getting paid back. I said, don't try to change him. I said, that's the curiosity. That's how he learns. What's that mean, and how do you do it? And he's going to charge full speed ahead, where the oldest one, the 12-year-old Marshall, is the scholar. The little one is there. He's eager beaver. He comes by that honest. But he was in Abu Ghraib prison in Baghdad. It would have been what? It was right after the fiasco where the prisoners and the guards were beating up on each other. And part of Abu Ghraib prison in Baghdad was the hospital. He was the head of that hospital. And he had this one kid, he was 18, 19 years old. He said, Mom, he never smiled at all. And he talked, when the boy that was a prisoner came on sick call, Mark talked to him through an interpreter. he said he never smiled. And I thought, God, what did that kid ever have to smile about? All his lifetime was nothing but war. And Mark took care of him probably, I'd say, a dozen times. And the last time he saw him, he said, well, we did everything we could for you. He said, I wish you well. And he shook his hands, and the interpreter looked at him. He looked over there, and he said, we thought all Americans was asses, and this one's not afraid to be kind. So when I go to the museum, I tell kids, kindness is your greatest strength. And also I share with them that if you have your best friend, or even a stranger comes up and they start dumping on you garbage that doesn't belong to you, I said, you know who you are inside. I said, you're a good person. You don't have to own that stuff. I said, when they tell me that, I just tell them, if it makes you feel better, cough it up, and I do an about face, and I'm out the door, because I won't listen to it.
What does freedom mean to you?
Being able to make my own choices, but also to be responsible for the ones I make. If I make a mistake, I can't blame Mr. Murphy next door because I made a big mistake, right? Learn from it. I tell them, learn from it. Don't pound on yourself because you made a mistake. Learn from it. Next time, make a better choice. That's how we all grow up. I made plenty of mine.
Are there any questions that no one has ever asked you that you would like to answer?
Oh, God, I can't think of any. But I had wanted to go Navy and I was too young. And I'm not sorry that I went Army. I wanted to be a Ranger. Oh my God, did I ever want to be a Ranger? But I didn't want to jump out of an airplane, so that kind of cut it short. No, the military was a good experience, a positive experience for me. And I saw kids in basic. I saw them change. They saw it in me, but I saw it in them. I said, if they're moving, if they're changing, maybe I am too. But I didn't see it myself. I saw it in them.
What was life after getting out of the Army and returning back home to Bangor, Maine?
I was a lost soul. When you get home, all the kids that went to school with me were married and had kids of their own, so they could go out one night a month, right? In the Army, you had 50 kids. If one couldn't go, you had 49 more that maybe they wanted to go bowling or skating or swimming or whatever. So there's always somebody there, always. And it was the people that made it so interesting for me. I'm a people person, not a crowd person. You know, I never was allowed to use the telephone growing up. You know, people get on the phone, they talk for 2 hours and say nothing. My father said, you say what you got to say and you're off in there. And that's how it was. And I never developed that habit, especially people my age. They visit by telephone. And I never picked up. They said, my kids said, Mom, you never call. I said, I don't need anything. You never ask for anything. I said, I got a warm bed and food in the house. And I said, I got friends, what else do I need? I don't need anything. I don't have to have all these gadgets so the kids don't think they can live without. And if I had those computers and things that you're playing with, I wouldn't know how to use them anyways. My son bought me an iPhone. I said, don't buy me one of them things. I'm not mechanical one bit. He said, Mama, we want to send the kids pictures to you. So I've learned how to see the pictures, but I still don't know how to run the thing. I said, name your address and telephone number, and I hit a button and it wiped it out. And she's not mechanical.
Before we conclude, is there anything else that you would like to say or share?
Well, I want to thank you for asking me. This is quite an occasion. But when I came home, I went to work at St. Joe's, and my husband and I divorced because of alcoholism. And not that he wasn't a good man, but it was one of these things, and he was a football player for Brewer. I said, get some help. And whether he was unwilling or unable, who knows? But I said, I've ladled a football. You run that sucker any way you want. And I'm out of there. I was married 18 years. 6 kids the first 8 years. Used to say to me, God, you're independent. I said, don't you kind of think I had to be? I said, you go to sea for 8 months, you're home for 2 weeks. You go to sea for 8 months, you're home for 2 weeks. Back to sea for 8 months. Come home for 2 weeks, long enough to make a baby. Back to sea for 8 months, home for 2 weeks. You can never say, hello, honey, what do you think? I said, you was never there. Who had to be independent? Same thing in the military. When the husband goes TDY someplace, the mother is the one that's taking care of the business. Huh? But I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing. They said, Dell, if you could go back in your lifetime and change anything, I said, what would you change? I said, I wouldn't change one thing, because at the time, I made the best choice I knew with the information I had. There's no sense in fussing at 86. You ain't going to change anything. I
So-
look forward. I'm a person that looks forward. Always better things coming around the corner. They better come around the corner. Because I
have
can't
one
change
more
them.
question
Yes.
for you. I just want to go back to your time at Fort Sam. You talked about you had a patient that was very memorable in your mind, the one with the feet
Oh,
that were cut off
oh,
because
yeah.
of frostbite. Is there anybody else or any other patients you ever dealt with?
Oh, there were many. I took care of women patients and babies, and oh God. But the winter in Korea in 1950, when this boy got the frostbite, was the worst winter in 100 years. And the troops had gone over without adequate clothes for winter. Who knew it was going to be that kind of a winter? And that left an impression on me. And every day in the mail, I live at the Leach House in Brewer now, after living at Hamden for 56 years. My kids didn't want me living alone, and I didn't have any trouble living alone, believe you me. That every day in the mail, there's 6 letters looking for money, and they're all deserving. But it's always a paralyzed veteran I give to, every time, because of this one kid with no feet. It's amazing. But we've got wonderful surgeons today and military people. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade my military time for everything. In fact, I wanted to stay in. When I came home, I had made staff sergeant in 3 years, which was good rating. And my mother was going through the change, and oh my God, she had the empty nest syndrome, and she's dumping on me, and oh God. So the sense of obligation was there. My husband was down at Maine Maritime. My husband-to-be was down at Maine Maritime at the time. If anybody told me, and I got discharged the 30th of January, '53, and if anybody told me I would be married in June, I would have told them they was crazy as a March hare, because I never knew it was going to happen. But we had dated, Butch and I had dated in high school, and he was funny. He had a wonderful sense of humor. But, you know, like I say, it was one of these things. We had a lot of growing up to do, both of us, even though we had experiences. And we stayed friends. He married twice after me, and when he died during Katrina, he was chief engineer in an oil tanker. And his son, my middle son, is deck officer in the Merchant Marine. He said, it only took me 30 years to get that rating, Mom. I said, yeah, but you went in as an able-bodied seaman, and you worked your way up. His father was an engineer, and he was deck, so there's a difference there. And he's got 2 boys, so he's done real well. I'm proud of all the kids. My oldest is a little French teacher. She teaches French, Spanish, and English. My second daughter is a nurse practitioner at St. Joe's. My Dana's the deck officer in the Merchant Marine. Mark is my Army doctor. And Andrew makes beer and ale at Gritty McDuff's in Portland, anybody. So he's a brewmaster. I said, he'd come by that honest. But good kids. The kids are the best things that ever happened to me. I would have liked to have had another little girl, but it wasn't meant to be. And I had to talk to myself, because when I worked at St. Joseph's and I worked in the nursery, I thought, oh my God. I saw this little one, and I said, oh my God, I wanted to ask Dell, you better wait until your grandchildren come. If the marriage ain't stable for 18 years, it ain't going to be stable with 6 more kids. So, but I'm the mother hen. I would have liked to have had an army of kids. My family came from, my mother had 13 in her family, my dad had 14 in his family. So I had a lot of uncles. I said, if you was a Terrio, you've got to be a relative. They all come from the county. And these people were the examples. Solid, they was as solid as a rock. And loving. They inspired me all my life. And even during the Depression, when we went up to stay with them for a week on the farm, because they had their cows and their chickens and, you know, potatoes and the whole bit, we'd always help out. And but they were the salt of the earth. They never once made us feel like it was an imposition to go and stay with them, ever, ever. And they were the examples. They're all gone now, except for their children. When I'm having my 6 kids, I'm not going to truck them all up there and say, put us up for the night. So I stayed home, took care of my own. But I miss the aunts and the uncles. And I was blessed with a good family, my own immediate family, plus, and I used to tell my husband, the very best of you and I are those kids, and don't you forget it. I said, why is it taking 50 years to wake up to what they have in their own backyard, right? But that's the way it was.
Now, do you think that your time as an Army medic inspired you to become a nurse?
Oh, I was a born caretaker. I was the one that, in the neighborhood down South Brewer. Again, all the neighborhood kids would have a big cookout, and oh my God, take pictures, the whole bit. I love children, and I was the mother hen from way back, as long as I can remember. My patients I loved. They used to say to me, Dell, you can make them do anything. I said, I don't make them do a darn thing. I said, number one, I asked them, what is there that I can do for you? Especially somebody that wasn't eating very good. I said, can I make you a toast and a cup of tea? I said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to feel bad if I know you haven't had dinner. I'm not going to eat my dinner, supper time, knowing you haven't eaten. I said, if I make one toast, maybe they might eat another one. But no, it was that person wasn't a 2x4 in the bed. That was like my mother or my father. And when you have a relative that goes to the hospital, you have to be trusting that she will take care, boy or girl, will take care of her like you would take care of them. You have to pass that over. And I miss the girl. I retired from St. Joe's in 1995, so I've been going to the Coal Museum just about, 21 years probably? All that, 21, 22, 95. And I miss the people. I don't miss the pushing, but I miss the people. I told Sister Fabian I can't run anymore. I said, my running days is over.
Dell, thank you for your service, and thank you for doing this project with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I loved it. I wouldn't trade my time in the military. Now, you guys, if you're not thinking about it, start thinking about it. It was the people that you meet. You never say goodbye. You always bump into somebody that knew you from way back when, or hey, even as a nurse in the hospital, I'll be in the supermarket. Hey, Dell, you took care of my mother. Hey, you took care of my dad. I have no idea who they are, but they remember me. Not only did you take care of the parent, the patient, you took care of the family. Same thing in the Army. He was at the Philadelphia Naval Yard. My husband was on the Boston. It's a Guided Missile Cruiser, 55 to 57, so I was a Navy wife for 2 years. I was very happy military, but he wanted to go back shipping merchant marine because of the money. So, but I never was sorry. We went to Norfolk, Virginia. I was there a year, so you get to see the country. And Texas, I love Texas. Although hot as blazes, oh my God, was it ever hot? And it was different. Texas was so much different than Maine. Down there is, I'm not a hot weather person. I'm an October girl. At least you feel like you want to do something. Never mind you're sitting there like a dish rag, I said, I'll never take my vacation this time again. It's always September and October. But I have no regrets ever. And today, even more so, it's you can't get away with this to high school education anymore. Even though I was an LPN, which is a 1-year nurse, as opposed to an RN, which is a 3-year nurse. And I tell the kids, I share that with the kids. Share what you know and pass it on. And I pass it on to my children, and they are my joy beyond measure. Like I say, I would have had 6 more if I could have had them, but that's not the way it was. And I never dated after that because I thought, well, with my luck, I would have picked on worse than one I had. And I don't mean that he was a bad person. It was the behavior that I didn't like. And it wasn't meant to be, so I said, you've got to be content to wait until your grandchildren come. Then now it's your great-great-grandchildren come. And everyone, you see your children and your children's children, and the habits. Good or bad, you see them. But I thank you all for inviting me. It was a pleasure. And I never would have found this place by myself ever. Where do you park your cars?